By the end of the 17th century, Dublin was the capital of the Kingdom of Ireland, ruled by the Protestant New English minority. In order to exert more control over the Catholic majority in Ireland, the oppressive penal laws were implemented vigorously during the Georgian period. By 1700, the population of Dublin had surpassed 60,000, making it the second largest city in the British Empire. After the 1800 Act of Union, much of Ireland's governing class, aristocracy and gentry left Dublin for London or travelled back to their Irish estates. But although Dublin declined in terms of wealth and importance after the Act of Union, it slowly became more distinctly middle class and mercantile. Parliament House was sold to the Bank of Ireland, which remains there to this day. Smaller houses were constructed, this time for merchants, doctors, lawyers and bankers. The city centre became the place where business was done, but where the destitute also lived. It grew steadily in size throughout the 19th century, while the glorious Victorian suburbs emerged as the preferred areas to set up home. By 1900, the population was over 400,000. While the city grew, so did its level of poverty. Though described as the second city of the British Empire, its large number of tenements became infamous, being mentioned by writers such as James Joyce. An area called Monto, in or around Montgomery Street, off Sackville Street, became infamous also as the British Empire's biggest red light district. The slums of Dublin were worse than those in London, Glasgow or Birmingham, with mortality rates per 1,000 of 22.3, compared to 15.6 in London. Women bore the brunt of poor housing conditions, having to cook over open fires, fetch and carry water from distant communal water pumps, often up several flights of stairs. Organize space so as to provide minimum levels of privacy, and try to keep drafty rooms, with high, albeit ornate ceilings, warm in winter. Buckingham Street in the North Inner City is a good example of a typical tenement street. The 1911 census returns tell us that 16 houses contained 1,273 people, and 107 households, most of them living in single rooms. 13 of these households were headed by women, either single or widowed. Number 13 provides a good representative sample: 8 households, all single rooms, except one which is two-roomed, 49 people. Occupancy of the single rooms ranges from 3 to 9 people, with 10 in the two-roomed dwelling. Here is a snapshot of just a few of those households. Margaret Hayden, 39, shares a room with her unemployed husband, Edward, 41, and their 3 sons aged 13, 9 and 4. She has been married for 16 years and not lost any children. They are Catholic. The spacing between the children indicates possible miscarriages. Rebecca Brennan, 55, shares a room with her husband, Thomas, 54, who is a house painter, and their son, Frank, a barber. She's been married for 20 years and had 1 child. The family is Church of Ireland, bearing out Sean O'Casey's portrayal of the tenements as a mixed religious environment, most memorably in the character of Bessie Burgess. Margaret Furlong, 28, lives with her husband William, 31, a dock labourer, and their 8-year-old son, Christopher. There is also a Mary Furlong, aged 8, entered as a boarder, but the enumerator has scored through her name and written put down in error, possibly Christopher's twin sister, who may have died, as Margaret has lost one of her 3 children. The family is Catholic. Mary Kavanagh, 39, shares 2 rooms with her husband Joseph, 40, who is a general labourer, his brother Henry, 42, who is a grocer's porter, and 7 children, ranging in age from 2 to 17. Her 2 eldest sons, Patrick and John, 17 and 15, have jobs as messengers, which means 4 incomes are coming into the household. Unusually, Mary describes herself as a housekeeper. Most women looking after households leave the occupation box blank, despite working from dawn to dusk. The family is Catholic. Lucy McNamara, 30, lives in one room with her husband, Thomas, 38, with 5 of their 7 surviving children. She gave birth to 9, ranging in age from 12 days to 12 years. Poignantly, the names of the dead children, Bernard and Josephine, and their ages at death, 5 and 7 months respectively, are entered on the census form, but scored through by the enumerator with the comment error, dead. Poor Lucy obviously wanted to remember her lost children on an official document. Thomas is described as a laboring man. He is illiterate. The family is Catholic. Marjorie Dixon, 48, shares one room with George, her husband, who is 53, a bricklayer, and their 5 children, ranging in age from 10 to 24. One son is also a bricklayer, and 2 of the girls are laundresses. There is also a nurse child, Thomas Power, living with the family, possibly a relative. Marjorie's child mortality levels are utterly shocking. Married for 28 years, she gave birth to 13 children, of whom only 6 survived. The family is Catholic. Mary Ann Bishop, 32, shares one room with her husband, Henry, 46, a labourer, and their 2 daughters, aged 12 and 1. Mary Ann is Henry's second wife. They have only been married for 2 years. Many poor women died in childbirth, and their husbands needed to marry again to provide mothers for their children and keep them out of orphanages and industrial schools. The family is Catholic. This quick snapshot of one street in Dublin gives an idea of what life was like for poor women and their families in Dublin in 1911. Child mortality and overcrowded accommodation challenge our modern ideas about emotional attachment to children. The need for privacy and personal space, and hygiene practices. Women were the main ones holding families together in these highly adverse circumstances. The cold reality is that at their peak prior to the First World War, with approximately 20,000 families, perhaps a third of the whole population of Dublin were living in single-room. Dublin's tenements contained some of the worst urban poverty to be found in Western Europe. Given that so many of Dublin's natives will be descended from the tenements. In 1979, the last families left, for new homes in the suburbs, and new challenges. The house fell into disrepair, and after years of court wrangling, was compulsorily purchased by Dublin City Council. Today in 21st century Ireland, one of the richest societies, apparently in the world, we have over 10,000 homeless people in need of a home. A third of this number are children. As well as homelessness, there is a major overcrowding crisis, where generations of the same family are forced to live in the same single house. Housing in Ireland is not only scarce but for both to rent or to buy, the cost is well out of the reach of most working people. For many years of the same 2 political parties, Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, being in perpetual government, hardly any social housing has been built. The policy of the 2 ruling parties has been for decades, to let the private market sort out the crisis. Capitalism has failed, and with no change anytime soon in sight, Ireland will continue to allow homelessness and poverty to be an acceptable concept in a first world country. In 21st century Europe,